A courtroom packed with people, families waiting for justice, lawyers ready to fight, and a judge prepared to deliver the law. Then, suddenly, the doors open, and in walks a teenager in a hoodie. The judge laughs. The prosecutor mocks him. Everyone thinks it's a joke. But within minutes, this so-called kid is about to expose the truth, destroy the prosecution's case, and leave the entire courtroom in absolute shock. Order in the court. The sharp crack of the gavel echoed across the packed courtroom. All eyes should have been on the stern judge sitting high on his bench, but instead, every head turned toward the unlikely figure walking nervously to the front. It wasn't a seasoned lawyer in a crisp suit, nor a confident attorney with years of practice. It was a teenager. He wore a plain hoodie and scuffed sneakers, the kind of outfit more fitting for a high school classroom than a court of law. His hair was a little messy, and his backpack looked like it still carried textbooks rather than legal documents. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some chuckled. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The case before the court was no laughing matter. A respected local businessman stood accused of fraud, embezzling money, tricking families, and leaving hard-working people bankrupt. Dozens of victims had gathered that day, desperate to see justice served. Emotions ran high, and tension filled the air. And yet, in the middle of this high-stakes trial, a boy barely old enough to drive had stepped forward. The judge leaned back in his chair, raising an eyebrow. His lips curled into a smirk as he studied the teenager. Then, with a booming voice laced with sarcasm, he said, "What is this, some kind of joke? Are we running a law school talent show today?" The courtroom erupted with scattered laughter. Even the prosecutor grinned, shaking his head in amusement. The judge continued, his tone dripping with mockery. "Go home, kid. This isn't a playground. You don't belong here." But the teenager didn't retreat. He didn't stutter, didn't shrink back, didn't even blink. Instead, he adjusted the weight of the thick stack of neatly organized files in his arms and stepped closer to the bench. His posture straightened, his shoulders squared, and for a brief moment, the nervousness in his eyes was replaced with something stronger, determination. The whispers in the gallery quieted as people sensed something unusual. This boy wasn't about to turn around and run. He wasn't here by mistake. He stood firm, gripping the files as if they carried the weight of truth itself. And though his appearance screamed teenager, the steadiness in his gaze hinted at something far greater. The judge's smirk faltered ever so slightly, but he quickly covered it up. Still, deep down, he felt a twinge of curiosity. Who was this boy? And why was he so certain he belonged in that courtroom? The judge wasn't finished with his ridicule. He leaned forward, his robe shifting as he jabbed a finger toward the boy. "You barely look old enough to drive, and you think you can argue in court? Please don't waste my time." His tone was cutting, and the insult drew a wave of chuckles from the spectators. Laughter rippled across the courtroom like a cruel echo. Some covered their mouths, others shook their heads in disbelief. The prosecutor, sitting smugly at his table, leaned back with arms crossed, a smirk plastered on his face. He didn't even bother to hide his amusement. To him, this was already over. A teenager playing lawyer? It was laughable. But then, something unexpected happened. The boy didn't shrink under the laughter. He didn't fluster or fumble like the crowd expected. Instead, he lifted his chin, his voice calm, steady, and surprisingly commanding. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the law does not discriminate by age. If I can prove my qualifications and present evidence, I deserve to be heard." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. The laughter died instantly. The gallery fell silent, as though the boy's confidence had drained the room of sound. Even the prosecutor's smirk faltered, just slightly, as he turned his head toward the teenager. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by the composure of someone so young. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses, searching for the right words. Finally, he scoffed. "And what exactly are your qualifications, son?" "Watching a few episodes of courtroom dramas on TV." His voice was dripping with sarcasm, but there was a hint of hesitation behind it now. Unfazed, the teenager walked to the evidence table. His hands didn't tremble as he set his thick stack of files down with a deliberate thud. Slowly, Carefully, he opened the folder and spread out several documents. His movements weren't rushed. Every step seemed intentional, almost rehearsed. "I'm here today, not as a prank," he said firmly, his eyes scanning the judge before turning toward the audience, "but because the victims of this fraud deserve justice. And if you allow me just 15 minutes, I will prove not only the fraud, but also expose the flaws in the prosecution's argument." The room buzzed with a new kind of tension, no longer laughter, but curiosity. The judge shifted uneasily in his seat. Something in the boy's tone carried real weight, the kind of authority no ordinary teenager could fake. For the first time that morning, the courtroom realized they weren't dealing with a child. They were facing something far more surprising. The prosecutor chuckled loudly, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He leaned lazily on his desk and muttered, "This should be good. Let's see what the child genius has to say." His mocking tone drew a few more snickers from the gallery, but the teenager ignored them. With steady steps, he moved to the evidence table. His hands moved with surprising precision as he flipped through the stack of files. He paused, pulled out a sheet, and raised it for everyone to see. His voice rang clear and steady. "First," he began, "the prosecution claims my client signed financial documents on March 3rd. But here," he pointed to the notarized form, "the signature was validated by someone who wasn't even licensed until April. Which means this entire document is a fabrication." The reaction was immediate. Gasps echoed across the courtroom. A few people leaned forward in disbelief. The judge's smirk, which had remained stubborn until now, faltered just slightly. But the boy wasn't finished. He pulled out another sheet, unfolding it carefully. "Second, the alleged account number tied to these funds doesn't exist in the bank's records. I personally contacted the bank's verification office, and here," he handed the letter across the table to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge, "is their official confirmation." The judge adjusted his glasses and scanned the letter. His expression tightened, his earlier amusement vanishing as his eyes darted from line to line. The boy's voice grew firmer. "And third," he said, raising his tone so every corner of the room could hear, "the prosecution has conveniently ignored evidence pointing to the real fraudster, the so-called victim's own business partner. These financial transfers prove it beyond doubt." He placed a final set of documents on the table, each page filled with detailed bank records. The courtroom erupted in a frenzy of whispers and gasps. The prosecutor, who had moments ago been smirking, now looked pale. His lips parted, but no words came out. He fumbled with his notes, his confidence visibly collapsing. The judge leaned forward, his voice sharp now. "How did you get all of this?" The teenager locked eyes with him, calm and unwavering. "Because I'm not just some random kid. I've been studying law since I was 12. I passed the bar exam last year under a mentorship program. Today, I stand before you as a licensed attorney, whether you choose to believe it or not." And with that revelation, the room fell into stunned silence. Silence swept through the courtroom like a heavy curtain dropping over the stage. The mocking smiles that had filled the room moments earlier were gone, replaced by stunned faces and wide eyes. Even the judge, who had been so quick to ridicule the teenager, now looked unsettled. Clearing his throat, he leaned forward, his voice softer, almost hesitant. "Licensed attorney? At your age?" he asked, as if repeating the words might somehow make them more believable. The boy nodded firmly. "Yes, Your Honor. I may look like a teenager, but I've dedicated my life to understanding justice. And right now, I'm here to make sure my client receives it." The judge sat back slowly, his posture stiff with shock. For the first time that day, he didn't have a clever remark or a sarcastic jab. His hand twitched toward his gavel, but he stopped himself. Finally, he raised his chin and gestured toward the boy with a reluctant nod. "Proceed." What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. For the next 30 minutes, the teenager commanded the courtroom with the poise of a seasoned attorney. His voice carried across the room with unwavering confidence. He quoted laws with pinpoint accuracy, each statute flowing off his tongue as though he had memorized the entire legal code. He cited precedents from past cases flawlessly, pulling out details that even experienced lawyers might have overlooked. Every time the prosecutor tried to object, the boy countered with sharp legal reasoning that left no room for argument. The courtroom, once buzzing with laughter and whispers, now sat in hushed attention, each person leaning forward, captivated by the unexpected brilliance unfolding before their eyes. Page by page, he presented evidence, connecting dots the prosecution had ignored. He explained financial records in plain, clear language that even the average person could understand. His arguments weren't just technically sound. They were compelling, weaving logic and emotion together in a way that made the truth undeniable. The prosecutor's confidence melted away. His smirk was gone, replaced by visible panic. He shuffled his papers desperately, searching for a rebuttal, but found none. Each attempt to interrupt was shut down, each argument dismantled with precision. By the time the boy finished, the words echoed through the chamber, and for a brief moment, the room was frozen in disbelief. Then, like a wave breaking, the silence gave way to cheers and applause, something rarely heard within the solemn walls of a courtroom. Family members rushed forward to thank the teenager, tears of relief in their eyes. Their savings, their dignity, their faith in justice, all had been restored because of him. The prosecutor, pale and humiliated, quickly gathered his files and slipped out of the courtroom without a word. His earlier smirk was gone, replaced with the hollow stare of defeat. But it was not the prosecutor's humiliation that left the greatest mark that day. It was the transformation of the judge himself. Slowly rising from his chair, the judge looked at the young attorney with eyes filled not with authority, but with humility. His voice was quieter now, heavy with regret. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "I mocked you, judged you by your age and appearance. And in doing so, I almost forgot what this place truly stands for. You've reminded me that justice has nothing to do with appearances and everything to do with truth." The boy smiled softly, gathering his carefully stacked files into his warm backpack. "Justice doesn't care about age, Your Honor, and it shouldn't. It belongs to everyone who dares to stand up for what's right." As he walked out of the courtroom, whispers filled the air once again. But this time, they weren't mocking chuckles. They were words of admiration, awe, and respect. Lawyers who had practiced for decades whispered to each other about the boy genius. Reporters scribbled furiously, knowing they had just witnessed a story the world would want to hear. The teenager pushed open the heavy courtroom doors, the applause still ringing behind him, his steps steady and calm. In just a single hour, he had turned ridicule into respect, doubt into inspiration. And that day, one lesson became crystal clear for everyone present. Never judge someone by how they look. Respect, fairness, and justice belong to all, no matter their age, their background, or how the world chooses to see them. Thanks for watching this story. If you enjoyed it and want to see more inspiring content like this, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support helps us bring more stories to life.